Hi everyone. Today I have a lovely guest with me, and today we got Carmel Ecker. She's all the way from British Columbia in Canada, and she's
Yep.
joining us today for this podcast. And I'm really happy to have a chat with her. So, little short introduction. Carmel is a single parent empowerment coach. She's also the managing director for eWomenNetwork Victoria, BC chapter. And that's basically how we met online. There's a
hmm
lot of online meeting going on since I'm based in Sydney, Australia. I'm really excited to interview her, and I'm certain that she's going to share a lot of great information that's going to help a lot of single parents out there. And I think one of the things I love the most when I was looking up her work is that she talked about how to switch from a survival mode to be a thriving parents, which we all need, whether a single parent, double parent, or just a woman. You want to depart from that survival mode and really live a more thriving life. And it's not easy, but there's a lot of tools and guides out there. So hopefully today's podcast interview will shed some light on that. And I also love the fact that she make me feel the work she's doing is making people feeling you don't have to do it all alone. You have mentor, you have people been there. And I think that support network is amazing and it's really wonderful. So without further ado, welcome to my podcast, Carmel.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. So um, I guess, first of all, I'm not a single parent, but I have friends. I have heard a lot of stories. I know it's not easy,
Mm.
especially when you I think especially at the beginning, the change and everything. So we I don't have firsthand experience, but I do have friends and people that I know. So your work is about empowering and coaching single parent to change that, what we talk about, the survival mode thing, and also to divide the stereotypes, almost like having image makeover to be more empowered, to be happy, to be successful. So
Yes.
it sounds really amazing, but for some people it sounds almost like too good to be true. So tell us a bit about your discovery journey, and also how do you encourage people to take the step and to believe in that's actually possible?
Yeah. Wow. Okay, that's a big question. But really, and I love the word that you used there, image makeover, because I think we really do need an image makeover for, the idea of what it is to be a single parent. There are single parents that are struggling. There are single parents that are multimillionaires,
Mm,
self-made
mm,
multimillionaires. And so the same exists also in two-parent families. What it really is that our circumstances are just, the reality that we live in, and they don't necessarily have to define us. Right? So the negative stereotypes that are out there about single parents can be really they can be really limiting, right? If we really believe that it's true that being a single parent is going to be hard, and that we won't have enough support, and that without a live-in partner, we're going to struggle, that there will be financial difficulties. When we have that mindset going into it, when we have that expectation, it's like maybe cliche to say it, but it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I'm not saying that those things don't exist, right? When I became a single parent 9 years ago, I definitely had these moments of, oh my God, like my world is changing, and I don't know what this looks like. And it's kind of scary. And I don't know if I can do this on my own. My son was 1 year old. And I just thought, like, uh, how?
mm,
How do I do this? His dad has always been part of his life. So it's not like he just disappeared. Um, and yet there's this feeling of being alone, right? When I've got my son, it's all up to me. All the finances, taking care of the child care. I also, plan out his extracurriculars and all of those things. Like, I plan everything, and it can be a little bit overwhelming at first. And so really what we have to do in those situations is step back and say, okay, what really needs to happen here? And what do I really want for myself? And what are the actions that I need to take in order to get there? And don't worry so much about the circumstances that you live in, because we've all got challenges in our lives. They're just different, right? So being a single parent is one aspect of your life. It's not your whole life. I don't know if that answers your
I mean,
question.
already feeling, I mean, I was just listening to you. I thought I was already soothed for some reason. No, I really felt it took me to a moment to be more present, that, we all have problems, challenges, whether you're struggling financially or you're multimillionaire. Everybody have their own problems, but you got to focus on one thing at a time, and where do you want to, be the next step, rather than all this other stuff. We can't like tackle everything at the same time. We just have to do one thing at a time, right? So what you said, it really pulls me back and is saying, be present and look at one thing at a time. And I really love what you just said at the beginning about, everybody got problems, and being a single parent is challenging, especially at the beginning when you say you don't know what's going to happen next. But couples also have problems. So once we take this, with a different lens, it may get easier. I don't know, like.
Yeah. Well, I was talking with someone just the other day and we were talking about that single parent journey, and she said that it was actually easier after she became a single parent because she could
Mm,
let go of the weight of the relationship that wasn't working.
right.
Right. And I
Makes
mean,
sense.
it's a very specific situation, right? That was her experience. Not everybody's going to have that same experience, but it, one of the things that she was pointing to and that I agree with is that your perspective is everything. So if you look at being a single parent as this terrible thing that's happened to you, you didn't plan it, you didn't want it, and your expectations of what life was going to bring you have been dashed,
Mm,
that's a really negative place to come from. And so if you can reframe that, if you can step back from what you thought your life was going to look like and say, okay, this is now my reality. What do I want to do with this? What's the
mm,
future I want to create from here? Then you're letting go of, you know, baggage of what your past expectations were. And you can move forward from a new, more powerful place. And, in my case, being a single parent has been probably the best thing that ever happened to me. It was a massive shakeup in my world, and it was what prodded me to make other really important changes in my life that have made me who I am today. And I am an infinitely better human than I was, before I became a single parent. It was a
mm.
hard transition to go through, but on the other side, man, things are good.
Mm. And with growth, it always at least a little bit uncomfortable at the beginning. Like when I was growing up, and also now my daughter, as we grow taller, I don't know whether you have growing pain in your bones on your legs. I had a lot of. I'm not even tall, so where did that come from? I don't know. But my calf, like my shin bone, I have a lot of growing pain, and now my daughter is saying the same thing. But that's kind of what happens when you have to stretch and grow taller, especially when it happens in a quick fast period of time. And I feel that the same, it was not easy when, as you said at the beginning, the transition, but that sort of helped you to grow. And I'm sure many people have the same experience. It's almost like if you can do this, you can do anything. It's one
Yes.
of the hardest things for many people to go through, because it's physical, it's emotional, it's financial, it's everything at once. And you have other human being to look after as well. So that just
Yes.
compounds the situation. But I also feel that a lot of couples now, when they are not together anymore, it's quite obviously there's a lot of drama in some, but there are a lot of people that are very civil. It's just not working out, or have different changes. Sometimes career also take you to a different direction. Someone may move to New York and it's not right for you, and it doesn't feel like you want to go, and it could be very civil as well. So there's a stigma behind all that, but sometimes it's not what it all seems, but then the perspective is everything.
Yeah, there's a variety of reasons why people end up becoming single parents. Um, and I can't really, you touched on some of them, but we don't, we need to change, you're right, we need to change that perspective. It's not that that's some horrible thing happened to us, and now we're in this bad situation. It's like, well, this is where my life has led me to. And what do I want to create from here?
Mm,
And that just having that openness really gives you space for creativity and making something magical, maybe even better than your life ever would have been within that partnership,
mm.
or if you hadn't had your kids, because not everybody comes to single parenting from a partnership.
Mm.
Sometimes, you know,
Right.
you just, yeah.
In any case, I think having a child is a huge lesson. Like it
Mm,
just makes you grow as a human being, is inevitable. So another thing I found it really interesting to think about, it's about when I become a mom, and also a lot of people, you not only you don't put yourself first, likely you put yourself last.
yes.
Make sure everybody has eaten, and then you're, oh my god, I haven't eaten the whole day, because you pack lunchbox and you prepare everything, but then you completely forgot yourself. You're running around, looking after everyone. So I think the self-care piece is important, but then a lot of people feeling guilty of not putting themselves last. So how
Yeah.
do you deal with that, especially in single parenthood?
Yeah. Well, it really comes back to that idea of when you're on an airplane and, they're telling you to put the oxygen mask on, they always tell you to put your oxygen mask on first and then assist someone else. And the reason that they do that is because if you are not taken care of, if you're not getting enough oxygen, if you're not cared for, then how are you going to help somebody else? And we need to really look at parenting that same way, or just life in general that way. If I am not well taken care of, if I don't take care of myself, how on earth am I going to be able to take care of my kids in the way that I want to, right? How can I be the parent that I want to be? How can I be resilient if I just don't have the energy, if I don't get enough sleep, if I'm not eating properly, if I'm run down, if I'm overwhelmed, if I get, and burnout is a very real thing,
Mm.
right? That can be experienced at work, at home, whatever. If you hit a point of burnout, are you very much used to anybody else? I'm not. I hit a stress point and I'm like, okay, mommy's going to go lie down for a few hours.
Mm.
And that's not ideal. So, if, really self care is a preventative measure for making your life workable. And that's really all it comes down to, is what's workable for you. Self care has to be part of that. It's not selfish, right? And I know people have heard this, and it's true. Self care is not selfish. It is the greatest gift that you can give to the other people in your life. There's a Jim Rohn recording that I listen to every now and then, and he talks about having an agreement. I think it was with his wife. I can't remember. And he says, "Tell you what, I'll take care of me for you if you take care of you for me."
That's nice.
And isn't that beautiful that we say, I'm going to take care of myself? I'm not going to place that expectation on anybody else to meet my needs, right? That doesn't mean that I can't ask. That doesn't mean that I can't say, hey, I could really use your help with this in order to meet a need that I have. And then that person gets to decide whether they want to fulfill that or not. But it's taking full responsibility for your life and your experience. And it is just the most empowering thing I think that anybody can do, single parent or not.
Mm. I love it. It's so much more civil than the way I told my husband. If you don't do this and if you don't do that, I have to end up taking care of you. You are getting more work on my workload. It's similar, but like that's so much nicer. Um,
Yeah.
there's no wonder why he calls me Dragon Lady when we first met. I don't know why he's still here, but hey. Um, oh, I want to say something about the children tend to model us, because I know that like if I look after myself, say, when I'm preparing food that is healthy or well nourishing, I talk it out and when I'm doing it to my kids so they know what I'm doing. And I noticed that they really model things from us. Like they would do things that copy us, right? So I think it's good to start early so they have that sense of looking after themselves. And I thought it was really important. And I also noticed them doing bad things that they are copying us from.
Yes, you'll know your habits. You'll know what all your habits are by watching what your kids do.
I know my 2-year-old is so funny. Like he can barely, stand up and pull a drawer, but he will use all his strength to open a drawer and take out like, my husband sometimes play video games. Oh God, I'm painting a really bad picture of him. So the kid will take out the headset and the game console and pretend to be daddy. And like I was like, wow, they really copy everything we do. And my daughter copy like me like eating healthy or breakfast. She was like, oh yeah, we should choose this option because it's healthier, like things like that. And I think that's brilliant. And we got to be careful what do we say and do. So I definitely for self-care in that case.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that extends to everything. Like what do you want to model for your children so that they lead an empowered life, right? So if we're always talking about how life is so hard and money's tight and I'm not saying we want to necessarily lie to our kids, we want to make sure that we're honest with them about, what's going on, but it's how we frame it that's really important. So, yeah, money's tight. So we have some choices to make, right? We can't buy everything. So we need to decide what we want the most, right? So that's a very different conversation than
Mm,
saying something like, oh, honey, we just don't have the money,
gosh, so much better.
right? Yeah. Yeah. So it's being mindful of the language that you're using towards yourself, towards others, about your situation. It really is so important.
I know you have this 5-step process or framework when you um, work with your clients. So can you tell us a little bit more about your 5-part framework?
Yes, absolutely. So there's 5 parts, and they are not necessarily like step by step. It's not like an order. They're all elements that come together, that work together in order to help a person create what they really want. So the first one, I shouldn't call it the first one, but one of them is mindset.
Mm,
So which is a little bit of what we've been
yes.
talking about, really getting clear on, what are the disempowering things that you're saying to yourself, and how do you want to shift that so that you're actually having a different kind of conversation with yourself, right? The second one is creating a vision. A lot of people do not know what they really want for themselves. I think as adults, sometimes we stop dreaming. We get caught up in the grind of daily life, and we maybe get caught up in the expectations, the social expectations of what we should do, and we stop dreaming. And we really need to come back to that childlike part of ourselves that was so creative and thought that we could do anything, because we can. We can really do anything that we want. It's a matter of having the will to make it happen and the belief that you can as well, right? So having a really clear vision for what you want for your future. Then the next part is motivation, identifying why you want what you want. And a lot of times people, they'll like say, oh, I want to start a business. Why do you want to start it? Well, because I want to be able to set my own schedule and stuff like that. Okay, but is that really the motivating reason for doing that? So it's a matter of digging down deep, like 5, 6, maybe even 7 layers to find out what is the thing that you, or what is the reason that you really want this thing. When I actually went to launch my first business, I identified a few different reasons and I dug down a bunch of levels. And what I discovered at the bottom was that, gosh, I don't think I'm really living. And I want to live a life with no regrets. I want to roll into that grave with a martini in one hand. Well, actually I don't drink martinis, but maybe a margarita in one hand, you know, and all wrinkles and having, kind of worn my body out and being like, woohoo, what a ride. There's actually a meme around that. And I just think, yeah, I want to really live my life to the absolute fullest and I don't want to have any regrets. That's my why. Not everybody's going to have the same one, but it's really figuring out like what is that deep rooted why that makes you get up in the morning and go, "Okay, I'm going to go kill it today. I'm going to be awesome. I'm going to do the hard things because it's super important to me that I reach this goal." And then there's creating your habits, right? Everything that we accomplish in life is created from daily habits. They don't have to be big. They don't like, a lot of times people have this idea that they have to do big, take big action in order to get to the goals that they have for themselves. And the reality is that most of our goals are met by taking daily actions, right? If you're a single parent and you want to change your financial situation, or you want to, let's say, uh, try and find yourself a new partner. What are the daily actions that you need to take in order to make those things happen? In the case of, you know, um, finding a new partner, it might be okay, doing some of the inner work, right? Figuring out what is it that I want in a relationship? What are the beliefs that I have? Breaking all those things down, doing the work in order to get to that end goal. And then the final thing is actually making a commitment, not to anybody else, but to ourselves, which kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier, that we tend to put ourselves last. And when we put ourselves first, when we make the commitment to ourselves first, we get to those fun goals and it creates so much more joy that we just freaking radiate it. And we create so much of that for the other people in our lives. It's not just us. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of emotional contagion,
Mm.
but it's really that, when two people are together, one person can be, kind of infected by the other person's emotions, positive or negative. So one of the things that I try to make sure that I do is keep myself happy so that every day my son is around a happy person.
It makes sense, total sense. And sometimes you may not be happy, but just listening to you in the last half an hour, I know that you will look at it in a different perspective. Even though you have a horrible day, you will look at it, you try your best to have a better perspective to relate to your son.
Yeah, well, and that's a matter of grounding yourself in the moment instead of, just taking that example of the terrible day. I
Mm.
mean, I've certainly had some days where I was like, it's going to be like that, is it? And but if you look at each of those, negative moments as just something that happened, and it doesn't mean that the rest of your day is going to be terrible. You can kind of notice them and then let them go and move forward. And you don't have to like pack a bag full of negative moments and cart them through your day and then have that make a negative impact on other people.
From just having this conversation made me realize, or want to say, that that's why, like, we're coaches, and coaches work with coaches and talk to coaches, because sometimes, yes, when you have a good day or bad day, you may talk to a friend, but the conversation is a little bit different, because coaches not only you get the training and the interest in that field, but is usually you become a coach because you share certain perspective or character, and a way of talk about things. And I find it when you have a good or bad day, when you have conversation with a coach, two things happen. One is that you either make each other accountable or of whatever happened, or have a better perspective, or it's a very different conversation. A coaching conversation is very different than talk to a friend to complain about something. So I think that's really valuable, and that's really part of self-care that you were talking about early on,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
that changes things and really can de-escalate things that could be burning in our life. So, and I want
Hmm.
to talk to you about drama, because I figure that there will be a lot of drama in people's life that you may be working with. So how do you help people when they say, you have a client say, oh my God, you can't believe he just did this and he just said that, or my mother-in-law or my mother just did this. How do you help people to neutralize their drama?
Mm. Yeah, it really depends on what the drama is, but I find that the most helpful thing is to bring them back to what they have control over.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't, and I have actually, I've fostered a pretty positive relationship with my former husband. So, things are pretty even keeled, but there was definitely a time when it wasn't ideal, when we weren't quite as friendly as we are now. And I really needed to stop worrying about what he was doing, what decisions he was making, and say, what do I have actual control over? And focus on that, because you can't control what other people are going to do, but you can control how you react to it, how you feel about it, and then the action that you take following that. So I find that probably the most helpful thing is to really focus on what you can do over focusing on what you have zero control over.
Mm. See, it applies to, even if you're married to your husband, it's kind of the same. You may have more
Yeah.
opinion or influence over, but still don't hope for the fact that you can control the action. The same with a coaching relationship. You wish your client to do the best, that you can't control them. So we may just live with this motto that you can just figure out how you can react and control your emotion rather than other people's decisions.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest benefits that I've ever experienced in my life was just from acknowledging that there are things in my life that I have no control over,
Mm,
and I get to choose how I react to those things.
mm,
And just acknowledging that, I feel gave me a lot of power. And so I try to share that as much as possible. That you can't control everything that happens to you, but you can control how you react to it. And it really does an amazing job of minimizing drama, because you stop getting so upset. You can get upset. You can say, "Hey, that was really unfair." And dial it back. Like, let yourself feel it and then dial it back and say, "Okay, yeah, that really wasn't fair. What are my options?" And then you don't escalate it. You don't keep ratcheting up the drama. One of the challenges of, it's wonderful to talk to other people about difficult things that are happening in your life. And like you said, you have to be very careful about who you talk to,
mm,
because if you talk to one person, they may be like, "Yeah, that's unfair. You should totally do this," and they'll actually rile you up
mm,
to maybe do things or try things or say things that are not helpful for the situation, versus talking to someone who, comes at it from a very neutral perspective and says, "Yeah, that is really unfair. How do you feel about it?" And asks curious questions, and helps bring down the level of emotion so that you can get to a point where you can think rationally and make positive decisions for yourself and everyone else who's involved.
mm. I mean, from this short conversation, I can hear how it will be really helpful to work with you, maybe as a single parent or not, because a lot of things we talk about, it's a coaching conversation. It's also just having someone that you can deal with that offer you that neutral perspective rather than help you to escalate all the things in life. So to wrap this up, tell us, how can people find more information about you, and if they want to connect, what's the best way?
Yeah, so the best way is probably, well, I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I actually really love that That's where I post the most. I rhyme. My website is speaknowcoaching.com. And of course, they can always email me at carmel@speaknowcoaching.com.
Great. I will put your link profile and the show notes as well as your website. So make it easy for people to check out your work. So
Thank
thank you
you.
so much for today's conversation. And I don't know, I felt very relaxed and soothed the way you talk, because you take pauses, because I'm like AK-47, as people know, like and I hardly take a breath sometimes, but I really enjoyed talking with you today. So thank you so much for sharing the way you work with your clients and all your tips and experience as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been really, really lovely.